Hello there. Welcome to the Future Founders Fireside Chat podcast series, The Journey. This series features weekly discussions about virtual reality, emerging immersive technologies, and entrepreneurship from the 2018 Future Founders VR Fellowship, sponsored by the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development and produced by SIXR. The purpose of this podcast is to learn about the journey that it takes folks to enter the world of VR technologies and entrepreneurship. We hope to create an engaging conversation around emerging technologies in Seattle. This is episode 9, featuring Rebecca Lovell, Director of Create33. With 20 years of management and operating experience, Rebecca has spent the last dozen years running and supporting startups, notably as Program Director for the Alliance of Angels, Executive Director of the Northwest Entrepreneur Network, and GeekWire's first Chief Business Officer, all before serving as the City of Seattle's first startup advocate. After 5 years in leadership roles with the city, ultimately leading the city's Office of Economic Development, Rebecca has now returned to the private sector as Director of Create33, a founder center conceived by Madrona Venture Group. She is interviewed by Future Founder VR Fellow Hafsa at the Ethiopian community in Seattle, in Rainier Beach. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoy the show.
My name is Hafsa, and so I'm going to be interviewing you today. And the first question is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your mission?
I sure can. So my name is Rebecca Lovell. I am, as of 2 days ago, the director of a founder center called Create33. It's right downtown in the heart of the technology and innovation ecosystem. And we're trying to create a center of gravity for innovators and founders and future founders, which is one of the reasons I'm here today, is to talk about entrepreneurship. Happy to give you my life story, but let me know what you'd like to dive into. I'm all yours.
Cool. How can you describe your organization? Like a quick review about it.
Yeah, well, so we just launched a few months ago, and I'm new to the party, but what we've noticed as we look across all of the really amazing organizations that support startups in Seattle, there's a lot of attention focused on the early stage of conceiving a business and building a presentation and getting that first infusion of cash or funding. But then you've got the really hard work of developing a team and acquiring customers. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of building a business, and everything from legal issues to emotional intelligence. And so we're focusing on that space, and we call it the messy middle. So we are developing really hard-hitting programming that hits each of those topics. But I think what really brings me to the work and what I'm most excited about is, in addition to all of these workshops and office hours and content, I think the real value is in connections and social capital. So creating a really powerful community of professionals and peers who reflect the dynamism and diversity of Seattle, that's to me where the magic is. And that's specifically my role with Create33.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, that's so interesting.
Thank you.
What challenges did you personally face, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, God, we are getting into the life story. Well, just to give you a little context, my career of, oh my gosh, it's been 25 years, so I'm giving away my age a little bit. 25 years since I graduated college has been kind of a corkscrew, sort of a twisting path, if you will. And I've worked in for-profit, nonprofit, academia, and government. And I've faced unique challenges in each one. But I think that for me, the deepest lesson that I have learned and try to practice every day is being my authentic self. As a woman in male-dominated industries my entire life, that presents a unique set of challenges. And I'll tell you candidly that when I was much younger and a little bit younger, my inclination was to change myself and try to blend in. I literally gave myself an ulcer. I made myself sick trying to fit And now the word fit is something that kind of puts me on edge. Why fit? You can be additive to a community, but be yourself. And so many lessons we could talk about there, but I think for me, that's been both a challenge and a real opportunity.
Wow, that's amazing. I had a problem with that too. I tried to fit in too much. And like my first year of high school, it was being in America for the first time. So I was like trying to fit in. So that took me to be quiet because I felt like my English was not perfect enough. So I used to talk in classes where I was like, yo, I'm not going to talk because I'm not going to be able to talk the same English that they talk.
So how did you overcome that?
I guess I failed the classes because I don't pay attention and I'm too quiet to ask for help. And my second year is when I decided that I don't care how I sound like, I'm still going to talk and ask for help. And yeah, I had to like drive myself. And even if like presentation times, I was shaking. I just literally wanted to fall on the ground. But no, I just went through and like I pulled through it.
Ah, that's beautiful. You know, and finding your voice, I think, is such a powerful symbol. And sometimes it's literally finding your voice. And I will tell you, you know, on my professional journey, I'm from Seattle originally. Moved away for school, moved back because I missed my family. But I was working for a law firm at the time, and just the sound of my own voice, like I almost didn't recognize it. Just the way I shaped my sentences, the cadence of my speech really sounded like the men around me. And I will tell you what drives me professionally is mission-driven work. I want to do the most good for the most people. And you just sort of have to take inventory of yourself and figure out what you can bring, you know, towards that goal. But I had this moment where this attorney said, gosh, you're too smart to be in marketing. You should go to law school. And it was this really weird backhanded compliment. I'm like, forget all of that. I don't want to go to law school. I don't want to be in marketing. I went to business school instead to get my graduate degree because I was volunteering in and serving on boards of nonprofit organizations that I truly cared about. And what I realized is that life is too short to do what you care about in your spare time. Like if you have the opportunity to make a living from your passion and your calling, do that. So I pursued my business degree to be able to do that. We can talk more about that later. But at the same time, and in terms of finding your voice, I believe it wasn't a coincidence. I also discovered karaoke. And, you know, talking about what you do to overcome the obstacles in your life, there is something really, again, magical about this community that I found at Busch Gardens. I don't know if you're familiar with it, in the heart of Chinatown AD. It's the longest running karaoke establishment in Seattle. But you walk in, nobody cares who you are, what you do for a living, where you're from. It's all about the music. And you know, getting the courage to get on stage and singing a song. It's all about singing it the way you sing it. One of my favorite songs to sing is Aretha Franklin. I am not the queen of soul, but I sing her songs my way. You know, so nobody can say, you don't sound like Aretha. All I'm trying to be is my best Rebecca. So at that moment when I found karaoke, I went back to grad school. The stars kind of lined up and I found my voice and I found my passion at work.
Oh, that's amazing. Where do you get your best ideas?
I know when I get them. It's when I'm brushing my teeth in the morning. You know, when you just kind of let your mind wander and you're just kind of absentmindedly, you know, working on another mindless task. I think that's when I'm able to free myself from whatever constraints or, you know, boxed in thinking I might have had. I'm just trying to think. I'm not sure that I've had any brilliant ideas, but, you know, every day I try to bring some new perspective or offering to my work. And when I was brushing my teeth yesterday, which was my first day at Create33, thinking about like, what can I do to build community that reflects Seattle and really enables this community and this city to be on the map of global innovation in the place it belongs. And frankly, you know, coming to talk with all of you and supporting the work that you're doing, literally the future founders of businesses that can change the world. There's nothing more that I'd rather do today. But one of the things I want to do, and this was a teeth brushing moment, is offer memberships to Create33 for the people in the future founders cohort. Wow. So I should brush my teeth all day, every day to get ideas like that. But make that happen. We can talk about details later. But I do think there is something about just letting your mind roam and getting outside the box and getting outside the building too, right? Yeah.
I'm going to let my mind wander the next time I brush.
Good.
What excites you about your future?
Oh, wow. Well, in the context of the work that I'm doing and the community building, that is my driving passion. But I do, that's informed by, I think, the leadership position we can take in innovation. And technology, I think, is what brings a lot of us together tonight. But I think about what Seattle and Seattleites are really good at. We read a lot. We love art. We love music. We've got all of this amazing software development expertise. And that's made us the gaming capital of the world for years. When you bring in virtual reality, that's not just another dimension of gaming, but when I think about world-changing technologies, you think of virtual reality as an empathy machine. Like, how can we, be the truly empathetic and emotive people and use a VR headset to have an immersive experience around what is it like to have Alzheimer's, right? Imagine putting yourself in someone else's shoes, or putting yourself in the shoes of a young woman who's too afraid to raise her hand in class. I mean, I think this is an enabling technology that can unleash the power of empathy. And when I think about the future, I believe that what we need as humans is empathy, creativity, and computational thinking. No matter how the world changes, no matter how jobs change and tasks change, I believe that if we focus on bringing out those three elements in young people, we will have a better future. And Seattle can, again, lead the world in building businesses and people that make a positive difference.
If you could send a message to your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
Oh, my gosh. Don't marry the first person you ever date. You're looking at me for a different kind of life lesson. I had a lot of fear and assumptions about what I could or should do. Maybe I wasn't brushing my teeth enough and unleashing the power of my imagination. But I was in this mindset where I thought, okay, the way I'm going to make a difference in the world looks like this. I was a resident assistant, basically like a camp counselor in college dorms. And I thought, oh, well, I'm doing this and I'm good at that, so I better just keep doing this thing. That's all I had the confidence to pursue. The way I got my first job was sheer accident. And I sort of call it playing in traffic, like if you just put yourself out there into the world, you never know what opportunities can come your way. And the one that came my way, it was my first boyfriend, the guy that I did marry. I'm no longer married, but he was all about going into corporate America. And there was a recruiter on campus to hire people for their management program. He couldn't go to this meeting. I'm like, oh, I'll just go and take notes for you. That's not really my style. I have one speed. And of course, I asked this guy a million questions. And he said, oh, you're not on my list to interview. I'm like, no. I couldn't possibly. He's like, just give me half an hour of your time. And he helped me understand that all the experience I had as a resident assistant and babysitter and barista and all this other work that I did made me, a really critical thinker and prepared for management. And that never would have occurred to me. So they flew me to Chicago. I got the job. The boyfriend didn't. But then I ended up in management development for an industrial supply distribution company. I didn't even know that was a thing. It would never have occurred to me. So I would tell my 18-year-old self to just, again, play in traffic, put yourself out there. And candidly, along this 25-year career path that I've had, most of my roles, my work, my volunteerism has come from just those serendipitous or fortunate connections that happen when you put yourself out there.
Wow, that's great. So there's a lot of challenges and periods that female leaders that are going to technology face. So what advice would you give them?
Well, the message of authenticity really is my North Star, although, it's interesting that coming off of that desire to blend in, if you look around at the white male-dominated tech community, they're in khakis and T-shirts. Your listeners won't know, but that is not my personal style. And I made the decision not to blend in anything that I do. The way that I speak, I talk with my hands, I smile a lot. I'm the same person at the karaoke bar that I am in a boardroom. Again, I really try to bring my authentic self. I do think, though, there can be a tax that you pay, whether as women or people of color, we're all going to experience this differently, where I have found that even to this day, with 25 years of experience, leading multi-million-dollar organizations, working on really strategic, complex initiatives, that even when addressing a group of women, this just happened to me a few weeks ago, I was asked to moderate a panel of 6 women mayors, which was awesome, to a group of women. It was all about women and empowerment. And when they were promoting the event, they described me as moderator as the lovely and effervescent Rebecca Lovell. I'm like, well, I'm also the experienced and substantive Rebecca Lovell. And it's just fascinating the way we use language to describe women and people of color versus kind of the hegemony of white men. And I'm very mindful of language and do my best to discipline myself and to help others get out of that really stereotypical thinking that I think can hold us back. And we internalize that narrative. That's the most insidious part of it. It's not just men describing us that way. We do it ourselves. So it's an awareness. I know that sometimes that might be the tax that I pay for wearing heels and dresses and lipstick and just being my fabulous self. But that's a tax I'm willing to pay because I'm much happier and more fulfilled being who I really am.
Yep, that is so great. I did have a question about the karaoke one, but you already answered. Because I was going to ask you a favorite song.
We can absolutely talk about karaoke. I have a philosophy. Do you like to sing or do karaoke at all?
I did one time with my cousins with karaoke, and my voice was just not this. I do karaoke in my room when I have headphones on because I love to dance.
Absolutely.
And I dance like 24 hours. Like my headphones is on my ears all the time, and I do karaoke, but I don't like really listen to my voice because I put the headphones on, so I won't really hear my voice. But yeah,
well, you're exercising those muscles already. But here's my philosophy about karaoke. Having been in that space for about 15 years, anybody can do it. 40% of it, in my experience, is song selection, and that is in the world of startups, we would call that product market fit. So song selection is about looking around at the audience and figuring out what's going to land with them. What do they want to hear? And then the product is your voice. So you have to pick something that's in your range. So just because you want to hear it doesn't mean that you can sing it. And the only way you can figure that out is by trying. But you pick the right song and you're almost halfway there. So that's 40%. 50% is just getting on stage and selling it. Just act like you own it no matter what. That only leaves 10% for actual talent. So in my opinion, pretty much anybody can get an A- at least at karaoke if you follow that formula.
Wow.
So, I've been studying this for some time. So I actually, one of my spare time activities, in addition to teaching, is I'm a mentor for Techstars, which is a technology accelerator. And there was one particular cohort of Techstars, early stage businesses who really had a lot of stage fright, and they needed to be able to get up on stage in front of 600 people and sell their business. So halfway through the program, I dragged them out to karaoke so they could get over some of that stage fright in a safe space. I'd like to think it helped, but it was a lot of fun either way.
Yeah, I should do that. I have a lot of fright with like presentations and getting in front of people. A lot of people, that's not my strategy, Well,
I think particularly when you're in a group, like let's say you're doing karaoke or doing a presentation, there's some people in the room who know you and they love you, and no matter what you do, they're still going to love you. The other people in the room probably don't really care. So if you think about that, you're good no matter what happens,
You're like,
right?
I don't care anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I mean, obviously you pushed past that in your academic life. So I hope you take the opportunity to keep working on it. I mean, you're doing this, right? That's great.
Yeah.
And so she talked a little bit earlier about how she felt like she needed to be her authentic self, and sometimes there was a tax with that. And we've talked about imposter syndrome, right? You know what that means. And so have you ever experienced imposter syndrome?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every day, even though I think people suggest that you become expert when you've done 10,000 hours. And after 25 years, even though I've done a little bit of this and that, I'm probably expert at something. Probably what I've done the most professionally is actually help people tell their own stories. But that leaves a lot of room for me, starting a new job, thinking, wow, this is great. There are people who know me and respect me, and that feels really good. But that means the expectations are really high. And, not in those teeth brushing moments, but most of the other ones, I question whether, do I really deserve their respect and trust? And they just basically have handed me a blank slate saying, create something, which is exciting. I love sort of managing chaos and creating something from nothing, and I can navigate uncertainty. But absolutely, every single day I question whether I'm worthy and whether I can do it.
And how do you push past that feeling? How do you stop that from stopping you?
I do find that, frankly, it sounds so tactical, but making little to-do lists for myself and just checking them off every single day. It's like, oh my, and then what I'll do, because you can't really predict what your day will bring when you're in the world of startups, is I'll get to the end of my day and then I have to add a whole bunch of other things to my to-do list, but then just take time to celebrate. Look at what I accomplished. I mean, just kind of that pause and reflect on your own accomplishments. I think there is something about sort of Western American culture where it's all about, fixing stuff and moving on. We don't take enough time to breathe and take in, when we are making a difference, particularly when the task may feel so massive. You have to celebrate the small victories along the way, both to, I think, boost your own confidence and give you the motivation to keep going towards the bigger goal.
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in your work with startups that you focus on helping startups create minimal viable products. What do you think are the keys to creating minimal viable products?
I'm going to come right back to karaoke. It's really product market fit. I would say product market fit and team are the two things that I care most about. Like when I was running the Alliance of Angels, which is an angel investment program and really takes those big risks on companies at the earliest stages, I literally got to screen over 500 entrepreneurs over 3 years. So you start to recognize patterns, right? And notice like, oh, here's what a winning formula looks like. I want to come back to product market fit and my karaoke analogy, but I will honestly say that having the right team makes all the difference in the world. And when you think about putting a team together, you want obviously to bring together the A players, the rock stars, everybody who's best at their one thing. But I've seen teams that do that and fail because they can't work as a team. And that's something that we really focused on. Is this a team that can get stuff done together? Is the whole greater than the sum of the parts? Can they check their ego a little bit and have some self-reflection and acknowledge what they're missing and lean on each other, to get to a better place? And when you sense friction with the co-founders or that kind of ego or an unwillingness to either be coached, and whether they want my coaching is immaterial. It's being good listeners, and a lot of that is listening to the market. If you don't see some of that like drive and passion, but a little bit of humility and empathy, that's going to be tough. I mean, building a business is hard, and you've got sort of personality clashes and egos that makes it even harder. So that's huge whether I'm judging a hackathon or, coaching a new business. The team dynamic is big, but product market fit. We can all sit around and think of ideas, and oftentimes they come to us because, hey, I've got a problem that I want to solve. Like you find that you're scratching your own itch, right? That might be great, but you don't have anything more than a science experiment unless there is a market of people who are willing and able to pay for what you're selling. So it can't just be you. You can't just be fulfilling your own need. You've got to make sure that whatever solution you think you have is addressing a real problem, right? So ideally you start with the problem and figure out a solution instead of thinking of, oh, wouldn't this be a cool app or a great tool? It's like, flip it. Let's look at where there's real pain in the marketplace or in the world, and then find the best way to fix that.
And we're working on a VR project, right?
Yeah.
And VR is different in the sense that in terms of a mass market, it's relatively new.
It is.
So when you talk about product market fit, and you're talking about XR, how does a startup make sure that they have a product market fit when they're in a brand new industry?
It is an exciting space, and I was kind of looking through the portfolio of companies that Madrona has invested in. They're our biggest investor, just to see, like, gosh, have they made the leap? Who's going to go boldly where no fund has gone before, right? And I was kind of reading some of the blog posts of the investor partners, and they see the world in 15 or 20 years where mass adoption has occurred. I don't think there's a real question that this is the way of the future. And it's just sort of a question of like, what's it going to take to get there and who's willing to make the leap. And I think that when it comes to, XR, AR, VR, what have you, when you're investing in businesses, you're looking for something that can grow or scale exponentially, if you can picture that hockey stick. And so if you look at virtual reality as an enabling technology that drives a business that has its own merits unto itself, power to you, right? That's an amazing feature. And again, it's an enabler. Frankly, I look at all of technology that way. A lot of people think that technology is an industry vertical. I see it as the horizontal that cuts across every single business. Every business is a technology business. And in the future, who knows? Maybe that's how we all experience the world. But there is this sort of awkward phase where we know we're going to get there, but who are we going to bet on, to win in 5 years or 10 years? And I think that, when it comes to gaming, that's kind of the first implementation that we see of that really immersive experience. That's not to say that's a safe investment. Any given game could be a hit or a total flop. And frankly, it's binary. Like either you're going to really win big or you're just not going to make it at all. That scares a lot of investors, right? So what they tend to invest in is something like, we're going to use virtual reality to enable all of, the games on this platform to get to the next level, right? So it minimizes their risk. So I think that probably, the companies that will make it see VR as a tool, and not necessarily the end unto itself.
Interesting.
And I do believe that XR, could revolutionize healthcare. And when you're thinking about what kind of business to build, you look at your assets and liabilities, right? You look at your strengths, and if you start with a problem, like say the opioid epidemic, which is sweeping the nation, that is an absolute problem. you may, and then you say, okay, so that's what we're working on. What assets do we have in that fight? Well, gosh, right here in our backyard, Seattle is a global capital of health. We've got the Gates Foundation, we've got PATH, we've got Fred Hutch, we've got amazing research coming out of the University of Washington. So we've got all those assets. So then how do we bring that together? And I recently learned about a business that is actually using virtual reality as an immersive training experience to help folks treat overdoses.
Oh, wow.
Right. So you start with a problem, you think about all the assets that you have and the people who can train, and then VR is the tool that delivers it in a way that's much more scalable than going through, a 4-year certificate program, right?
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Nope. That's about it.
Let's see here. And I just decided today to join Hafsa because she wanted the support. So
that's great.
She did such a great job. But there are some other questions here.
And we've got other folks in the room too, so I always love to make these more of a conversation than just a monologue or even a dialogue. So,
So, it's really interesting because you help startups survive and thrive after they get their money, right? After they get that funding, and you also are excited about VR, right?
I am.
And so I think I wanted to focus on that intersection, right? If a VR company was coming to Create33, what do they need to do to get the most out of that experience?
Yeah. Well, I will say that the social capital is so important. It's interesting, and without, this is day 2, so I shouldn't call myself an expert, but, one of the things I've noticed about some of our resident members is that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Sometimes you think you're all set. It's like, oh, I've already got legal advice. I don't need a free half an hour with an attorney who can help me expand my thinking. So again, coming with that mindset of being a great listener and wanting to engage and wanting to just be the sponge and soak up all of the resources and tools that are available. For me, that's going to be a tremendous qualifying factor. We only have so much room, and I want to fill the room with people who are going to add value just by being who they are and asking, insightful questions. Because if you have that question, there are probably 9 other people in the room who have the same question and for whatever reason aren't going to ask the question. So, coming to Create33, wanting to engage in that community, whether you have something to say or something to ask, they're both tremendously valuable. So I think just being open to kind of receiving information and resources. Now, I'm not saying that we are in control of your success. Everyone owns their own destiny. I think our goal is to shorten the path.
And I don't know how many people are familiar with or have gone through a business startup incubator, right? Probably not many. So I want to ask you to kind of give us, and I know this is only day 2.
No, that's fine.
But give us insight into what the typical day looks like in a place at Create33.
Right. And I think there are a couple examples I can give. Day 2 at Create33, I only have so many observations to provide, but I have been a mentor for Techstars since 2010. So since
Tell us a little bit of who Techstars is.
Yeah, so Techstars is a technology accelerator, and they've got locations and classes around the world, but they really are designed to, again, shorten that path and accelerate the process of early stage startups who have a team, but they've likely not yet gotten outside funding. right? So it's that highest risk stage, but Techstars identifies those teams and products and markets that seem to have some promise. So the program is 11 weeks, this totally intensive sort of boot camp type environment. And it's mentor driven, meaning that we bring in experts from human resources and legal and storytelling and financing and how do you acquire your first customer. So they are literally getting information, all day, every day. Over time, of course, they have to build products. So they're working long hours and carving out time to actually, do some development and acquire some customers. But I think that one of the dynamic there is that if you've got 100 people giving you advice over the course of 11 weeks, if you've got the heart and commitment of a founder, you are gonna probably have to ignore 95% of it, but you have to know which 5% is gonna work for you. That's the magic, right? You can kind of get whiplash when you get information and advice from all around you, and being a great listener, but having some confidence to blend with that humility and having the filter to know, oh, that's a lesson that I can apply. That's, I think, what it feels like to founders who go through really intense accelerated programs like that. But I think, and again, and I'll come back to this theme again and again, is that content, the material that you get is important. But the social capital and connections, I think, are really what add value. Whether you are being introduced to investors or introduced to a new team member or your first customer or a strategic partner, that's, I think, the game changer with these accelerator programs. And that's part of the value we plan to bring at Create33. And, in my experience, as a woman and having led the Office of Economic Development and doing deep dives into data and what's happening in Seattle's economy, it's easy to point to statistics that show, well, gosh, for some reason, women and people of color and LGBTQ communities and refugees and immigrants are not getting financing at the same rate as white men. That's a hard resource that's easy to quantify. But a lot of that is wrapped up in, obviously, institutional racism and being barriered from the kind of connections and network that other communities enjoy. That's a privilege that can be an echo chamber. And one of my personal goals is to bust that echo chamber wide open and create a community that is absolutely intense and, driven to scale and grow and diverse and inclusive and reflects, the spirit and the population and the community that Seattle is.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk about echo chambers and when you talk about kind of the isolation that certain communities can experience when they're trying to start a company, how do teams and individuals break through that?
Gosh, what I've seen, and I'm drawing on sort of a couple sets of experiences here. Like when I was leading the Office of Economic Development, we have an amazing team with incredible lived experience as entrepreneurs, as community organizers, a diverse team that reflects who Seattle is. And, the vast majority of the population doesn't know about us. We have a bit of a marketing problem. But one of the things that I did to start to change that dynamic is say, okay, everybody, I don't even want to see you in this office. Because if you are, you're not doing your job. You need to go to where the communities that we want to serve can find you. Get out of the building, go to community centers, go to coffee shops, go find the community that otherwise doesn't know we exist, and provide those services. A lot of that is incumbent upon us. And making those resources like physically available to the people who wouldn't otherwise have the access or opportunity to avail themselves of it. So I feel like that's incumbent, upon government. I feel like that's incumbent upon us at Create33 to go out and find the current and future founders that, that your typical investment fund wouldn't have found on their own. When I was running the Alliance of Angels, now this was back 2006 to 2009, again, kind of looking at data, 65% of the investments that we made came from our own network. And that tells you the power of having like deep and trust-based relationships. But that also says it's the usual suspects. It's XYZ lawyer, you know, this banker, that accountant, you know, people that, you know, the other white guys went to grad school with, all just kind of, you know, referring deals to each other. It's real. You know, that network effect and social capital. So that's a thing. And that's a thing that you have to, I think, acknowledge, own the privilege that we've enjoyed in having access to that, and work really diligently to break down those barriers.
And so when people are reaching out and going into those different networks, what are the, you know, so when Hafsa goes out and reaches out to a new network where those resources are.
Yes.
What is your advice?
Yeah, you always, I think, you know, you always want to have a warm contact, right? So
okay.
Warm, right? So,
I thought you said worm contact. I'm
right.
Like,
what does that mean? What is that crazy acronym? One of the things that I think is, you know, maybe good and bad about Seattle, it's worked well for me, is that I feel like we are a pretty interconnected town. There's a good chance that you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, right? So don't be shy about activating the network that you have and say, hey, you know, I want to meet Tim Porter at Madrona. There are tools like LinkedIn that you can use to see who knows who. Look at me promoting the LinkedIn, and I'm not getting commission for that. But I think that, you know, the analog and again, really rich experience that we have is informational interviewing, right? When if you set a goal for yourself and you're not really transactional about it, but know that it's going to take some time to build trust and build relationships to get there, every conversation that you have as you're building your own network, you want to bring something interesting to the conversation. The rule is, even if you're looking for a job, don't ask for a job in the first conversation. Create a connection, like create meaningful dialogue. But you can leave asking for advice. And I think that can actually help both sides of the equation. Sometimes it's hard to say, oh, I need help. And then if somebody says I need help, then that sort of puts a strange pressure on me. But if you say, I need your advice, then it's like, ooh, I'm an expert. They want my advice, right? So then the person who's giving the advice feels good about it. The person who's asking feels good about it. It's a really positive interaction. And when you ask for advice, you can ask for, gosh, you know, who are two people that you think I should talk to? Right? You leave every meeting with some kind of action, not asking for a job, not that transaction, but, you know, after you've demonstrated that you're, you know, a relational human being, you can take it to that next step and then stay in touch with them and send them articles that they think are interesting. And again, it's that serendipity, playing in traffic. You never know what could develop just from making all those meaningful, respectful connections.
Oh, great. I guess, how much time?
Oh, well, I have a question.
Okay.
Sure. And you all should introduce yourselves so everybody knows who you are.
Well, I'm Budi. I'm also co-direct with Diana, co-founded the SIXR. What's interesting about what you're saying about the serendipity and pathway and like all that makes sense to me. I know it's a bit of like art. Like a magic this happens, right? Because like I know Hafsa like a couple years ago, actually TikTok.
Oh yeah.
Well, I was teaching her robotics, and then she reminded me that and then also another thing is like I think you mentioned about that.
Oh, I love it. Why fit in when you were born to stand out? Dr. Seuss and I are totally mind melding on that. I didn't even see your T-shirt. That's awesome.
But so those like two questions that I have. Like first one is about pathway, and I was able to actually met David Harris through what your initiative is, like let you be like outside of the comfort zone, and then talking to the community. And then at one point that he was at Europe Commotion, where a lot of the VR AR startups are,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah, I think they have the only mixed reality studio like this side of the Cascades. It's awesome. Yeah.
So I wasn't able to actually make use of like his time at the time, but I actually scheduled another time at Municipal Tower tour and talked to him about empowering homelessness. And I was just doing presentation, blah, blah, blah. I want to do this. And then he said like, well, you know what? There was an internal hackathon that is similar. Would you be willing to help me out with this? Like, so that's how it was born into like the Future Founder, because it's innovation in Brazil.
That's such a great origin story. And, you know, I think that's just a lesson in just challenging yourself to say yes, even if it wasn't your goal or your plan. And that has been, you know, sort of going back to my 18-year-old self, that's been my life lesson, is like, I always have a plan, but I'm always willing to go off plan if something cool comes along. And the way I got into this crazy world of startup and tech and investing was not my plan. My plan was, I'm going to go work at the Gates Foundation or the Casey Foundation, because I really wanted to bring that sort of mission-driven work and business acumen to the nonprofit community. But I'm in grad school, and I teach at the University of Washington, so I say this with all due respect to the academic part. The extracurricular activities were really phenomenal, and that was the life-changing piece for me. And a lot of the work that you do is team-based, which is important in life and in startups. And there was this competition in grad school called the Venture Capital Investment Competition, where a group of students basically pretend to be investors, and they're judged on their ability to evaluate a business plan. It's kind of meta, but it sort of flips the business plan competition thing on its head. So suffice it to say, I didn't even know that was a thing. It was not in my consideration set at all. But there was a team of 4 folks, one that I knew particularly well, and they needed a 5th person. And they were looking for somebody who had experience in entrepreneurship, investing, or biotechnology. And I said, I am 0 for 3. Why in the world would you want me on your team? Talking about imposter syndrome, right? And my friend Andy said, well, you just win stuff. Like, we just want you on our team. You win things. I'm like, wow, that's... Okay, so that felt amazing to have somebody believe in you and tap you on the shoulder. Not in my life plan. But then we became this little team that could. We won the intramural competition. We won the regional competition. We went and competed against MIT and Stanford and Oxford and won this global competition, which was crazy. And I will tell you the reason that we won. We used to say they may be smarter, but they're not 8 hours smarter, meaning we literally stayed up all night doing the research and just doing the hard work and rolling up our sleeves. So we were like the hardest working team. But I think the other thing that powered us to success is that using the network in the Seattle community, where every venture capitalist and angel investor, like literally in Seattle, met with us to help us prepare because they just wanted Seattle to win. And so we leveraged just working hard and network. And for me, the power of serendipity, someone tapping me on the shoulder and then me saying yes when I could have said no. And that's what got me into this career arc that I've been doing since I got out of grad school in 2006. So yeah, there's serendipity, but you can make your own luck by saying yes and looking for ways to get outside your comfort zone, just like you said.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that my Future Founder VR Fellows were going to go volunteer for Chick Tech High School.
That's great.
So he's going to be like going back as a mentor.
Full circle. That's awesome.
Teaching a VR. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I also want to ask you about, like, you've been in the nonprofit and for-profit, government, academia. I'm just wondering, like, it's really so hard to like wake up and like be excited about, like, what's just like your driving force? What drives you? And then like, who has helped you along the way?
Yeah, well, I've given just a couple of examples. You know, my friend Andy saying, we want you on this team, even though I didn't feel like I was qualified. That was amazing. On the flip side, he helped me by pushing me out the door. That lawyer said, oh, you're just too smart to be in marketing, right? And so help comes in a lot of different forms. That just motivated me to go, take control of my destiny. But, what I did find when I was, again, working for this law firm, and this was back in 2002. Oh my gosh, it's like 16 years ago. Is that, I did marketing by day, but then in my spare time, and you make time for stuff that you love, right? I think the best time managers are busy people. You just fit it into your schedule. But I did lots of volunteer work in the nonprofit community. and again, I had that decision point where it's like that aha moment of let me do what I care about. And so I would say that what informed every single decision after that was the mission. And to me, the business model, I don't care if it's for-profit, nonprofit, working at the university, working in government. It's all about like what tools do I have that can make an impact in society? I'm not multilingual. I'm sort of conversational in French and Spanish. So I'm like, oh gosh, I haven't set myself up to, get into global health, right? So you just sort of, again, take stock of who you are. I grew up here. I went to Garfield High School. I'm fortunate to have a community there. My family here, going to graduate school here. It's like, oh, those are my assets. I'm going to focus on Seattle, and I want to help in my small way to make this the best Seattle that I can imagine, right? So that's informed every decision, whether I was, investing in startups through the Alliance of Angels. I then ran the Northwest Entrepreneur Network, which provided programming for entrepreneurs. So it was a lot like what I was doing at Alliance of Angels, but instead of working for investors, I was working for the community. So like every step I made sort of felt closer to my heart. I went to serve as the first business officer of GeekWire, the first chief business officer. And it was one of those informational interviews where they were just asking me for advice about who they should add to the team. And I didn't say myself. And they were like, wait a minute. We need you on this team to build the business. Wasn't my plan, wasn't their plan. Beautiful serendipity happened. But what drew me to it is not that, I didn't dream of building a media company when I was a little girl, but I, for the prior several years, I love the idea of being a megaphone for this amazing innovation community in Seattle. So that's the connective tissue across every move that I made is like, what can I do to further this story and this community?
Yeah, my next question is about diversity inclusion part, right?
Yeah.
So I was at the collective, and it was with you, Beverly. There was a tea ceremony. The story was like
Japanese tea ceremony.
Japanese tea ceremony. That was the first time that I was actually watch it. And the presenter is Akami. I think her name is Akami. She was like the first female was hired by Microsoft from the outside of the United States.
Oh, wow.
And then she was not able to actually appreciate her heritage until after retired. And then she's actually learning how to do all this other stuff and learning like ikebana or like the tea ceremony and all that other stuff.
It's amazing.
Just I'm wondering like in terms of pathway, right? Because of the future founder VR fellows are they're coming from the Black, Latinas, and minorities, women's, and that kind of like background. What would your advise the path to follow for them so that they don't actually lose that kind of color, flavor, what you call it, right?
Right. I mean, that's being your authentic self, right? And I think that, again, I'm very aware of my privilege and know that, being myself, I do pay that tax and I'm called bubbly and all that, which isn't the worst thing in the world. But I think the tax is much higher for communities of color. So I just want to be really candid about that and acknowledge that I think it's even harder to realize your full self when you're being put into a box. A little bit off topic, but I'll share because we share the connection with David Harris, who's amazing. Trish DeZico, who runs the Technology Access Foundation, an engineer. She also worked at Microsoft and, a queer woman of color, and she identifies as a person of color first, right? And then as a woman, as she's explained this on many, many panels that she's served on. So I'm roughly quoting here, but she's better at telling her own story. But, her struggle was that Microsoft thought, oh, this is amazing. We've got this engineer and she's a woman, and let's just put her in this box and have her lead our diversity initiatives. Oh, great. Pat yourself on the back. We're all good on diversity now because we got Trish taking care of that, right? Or Trish was expected to mentor every young woman or every person of color who came into Microsoft. When does she have time to do her own job? Where is she getting paid to do that, right? And so I just want to acknowledge that I think while I am promoting being your authentic self, I think that it provides particular challenges for communities who experience barriers. So just sort of want to set that table a little bit. And now, of course, I've lost the thread of your question.
For the young future founders, so that Akami is great, because she was able to experience, share this to the world, because at the collective there was about 30 people just watching this tea ceremony, Japanese tea ceremony. But in terms of infusing your own thought, your own diversity and heritage into your work.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Is there any pathway?
Well, candidly, I hesitate to answer because I don't want to suggest by any means that women or people of color or the queer community should change who they are, or that the onus is on them to do something different. I think that the onus is on employers to understand not just, that there's all this ink spilled and all this conversation about, well, gosh, we just don't have a diverse pipeline. And we can talk about pipeline and how we can prepare our own youth for the jobs of the future. It's not just about hiring people. It's about retaining and promoting them and making sure that they have access to mentors and role models just like everybody else. And it's tough to get that flywheel going. It's tough to be the first, right? As your tea ceremony officiant was sharing with you. But once you kind of get the perpetual machine, in motion, and you can kind of bring in more people and create some critical mass, I think that's when you start to change company culture. But it's the company culture that needs to change, not the youth, not people of color, not women, not the queer community. So I think that there's a lot of work that has to be done on the company side. And, frankly, what we see in Seattle is that still something like 75% of our technology talent is being brought in from outside of the region. Now, I think it's wonderful that Seattle is a welcoming and inclusive city, and we should, and I hope will always be that. That said, we're missing the opportunity to cultivate the next generation of talent in our own community. And so employers, if they were thinking straight, with some enlightened self-interest, they would invest in local talent. They would invest in VR training programs. They would look to the truly diverse community that we have in Seattle and make sure that all of our residents had access to those tools. When you look at our economy, people might just kind of take a look and say, we don't have a problem. The median income for average families is up to over $100,000. If you disaggregate that by race and ethnicity, it tells a very different story. White families make 2.5 times that of Latina families and African American, and 40% higher than Asian American families, right? So very different story around shared prosperity. And we are missing the opportunity to cultivate local talent. Because again, being strictly practical, it's so much easier to recruit and retain people who are from here and have roots here than it is to bring people in, from outside of the region. So I think that to create change and to enable people to be their authentic selves, we've got to change company culture, and it makes dollars and cents for them to do it. It's not just the right thing to do. It's the smart thing for them to do.
So talking about choosing your winning team, right? So in terms of when you're choosing your winning team, the company, for example, when you're interviewing for another company, trying to get a job, or if you're trying to find a collaborative partner and team, how would you tell them what to look for in terms of choosing the right thing?
Gosh, if I were judging a hackathon or thinking about whether or not we should invest in a startup.
Have you participated in hackathon?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, as a participant? No, I just judge people. It's really I should just acknowledge
that. But only in a good way.
No. I hope so. I really hope so. I try to add some value by providing feedback. But it really does come to.
It's so much fun, right?
Yeah. Really.
Yeah. I know being the judge is like it's also fun. I mean, the different.
Oh, it for sure is. But you can. It's like leadership. It's so difficult to define, but sometimes I think you feel it. It's and it's little things. It's if you have a group of 3 or 5 or 9 people, and one person is giving the presentation and uses I language instead of we language, I'm like, that's going to be trouble. They might have a really interesting product, but who's going to want to work with that person on Monday morning after the hackathon is over? So it's little things that signal, are they collaborative? Do they share credit? Do they acknowledge where, they had a failing and somebody else stepped in to drive the project forward? Because you know how intense it is over 36 or 48 hours to try to come up with an idea and then run around and get customers to validate it and do surveys. It's so much work and it's super stressful. But I think that when you've got that right team, that's a bonding experience that makes you better. And so just so teams that demonstrate that everyone had a leadership opportunity and everyone contributed, that's huge. And it's just in the way that they present, you can kind of sense that team dynamic. And I remember, when I was at Alliance of Angels, we looked at a really interesting deal. And investors often look for teams that have done a similar thing before. It's like, oh, they know what they're doing. They're going to do it again. Great. That looks good. But we just sensed that the CEO and COO didn't get along, and we did not invest. What ended up happening is that the team did break up, so we're right about that. The startup did okay. They ended up being acquired, so we missed out on that opportunity. But I just can't emphasize enough how important that collaborative team dynamic is, where it's that magical combination of having the confidence and passion, but humility and listening ability, right? And collaboration that binds the team together.
Cool. So so this is very inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure.
And then, I do want to ask if you, how do people find your work and how do they contact?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I have 2 email addresses, so use whatever is easier to remember. It's Rebecca@Madrona.com. It's REBECCA. The one I monitor the most closely is Rebecca@Create33.co. Yeah, I should be easy to find. If I'm not doing my job right. So.
And LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, yes. I'm pretty easy to find. My last name is Lovell, rhymes with shovel. Love with 2 L's on the end.
Very cool.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very inspirational.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe and give us a rating or comment if you enjoyed this content. This episode was brought to you by the City of Seattle's Office of Economic Development and SIXR. Mixed and mastered by Joshua Duchesne. Please check the show notes for more information. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we hope we've inspired you to keep exploring your own journey.